When I started a carnivore diet back in 2012, I wasn't really consuming enough fat for almost a year. This caused two problems. One, I wasn't getting a high enough percentage of my calories from an energy source, such as carbohydrates or fat. This means that I was tired all the time, I was very fatigued. I would say suffering from a lesser form of what we know now as rabbit starvation, when you have too little fat in the diet and too much protein. Although it wasn't quite rabbit starvation, I could have definitely used more fat in my diet. The second problem with this is lack of nutrients. Vitamins and some minerals are stored in the fat of the animal, particularly fat-soluble vitamins. And without a high fat percentage in the diet, you're not getting large amounts of specific nutrients. Every one of our native ancestors, hunter-gatherer groups, obtained 80% of their caloric energy from fat in just about every single case. What this means is that when we follow a carnivore diet, it makes sense to model our diets and our macronutrient ratios after their examples. In this particular case, the Eskimos set a great precedent for this because they consumed 6 pounds of lean muscle per 1 pound of fat, 1 pound of seal oil. Since the Eskimos were eating very lean meat and pure fat, it gave a contrast. It gave a very specific ratio. It's not like they were consuming marbled meat with fat. They were just consuming pure lean meat and pure fat. And the ratio that the Eskimos ate were 6 pounds of lean meat to 1 pound of fat. But that is actually 20% calories from protein and 80% calories from fat. That is because protein has a much higher water content and fat is much more calorically dense. So it's not really a crazy high amount of fat if you think about it, but a lot of foods now don't offer that fat ratio. Ground beef, I believe, is around 70% fat. So if you are consuming ground beef and you're not rendering out all the fat, you do get pretty close. But people eating steaks, especially some of the leaner ribeye steaks, aren't getting nearly enough fat on their diet. And we want optimal energy levels and optimal nutrient density. The energy levels can simply be achieved through this macronutrient ratio, but the nutrients won't be there unless the fat is grass-fed. Today, Frankie Boy is going to show you two very simple ways to add fat to your diet through beef fat as well as bone marrow. The reason I'm using beef fat and bone marrow and in this video as well as what I eat personally is because a lot of animal fats are high in omega-6 fatty acids because of what they're fed. And we want to maintain a 1-to-1 approximately omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. In order to do that, it has to be either grass-fed, wild-caught, pasture-raised, a very high-quality animal product. Unfortunately, grass-fed beef fat is usually the only food that people have access to that comes close to this. Not only that, other fats, especially grain-fed beef fat, tend to be inedible. They have an off acrid taste because of what they are fed. This is something that doesn't really occur to a lot of people because most people are eating either tallow, which is rendered melted beef fat, or something like butter or maybe even cream with their meat. Having the raw fat has so many benefits. I did a video on carnivore constipation where I explained one problem people have with digestion is when the fat is too easily available to the stomach, aka melted or rendered fat, as well as high omega-6 fats. So by using this fresh form of high quality beef fat, we're alleviating a lot of issues that people might be having with this diet. Here we have two different types of marrow bones. The marrow bones that are larger and more circular are the upper leg marrow bones, and the ones that are thinner, that have a more oval shape on the inside and are much smaller, are the lower leg marrow bones. The first Alaskans that ate mostly caribou actually preferred the lower leg marrow raw and the upper leg bone marrow boiled. So, food preparation methods in indigenous groups had very specific reasoning. The lower leg bone marrow was usually creamier, softer, more yellow in color, possibly more nutrient dense. And the upper leg bone marrow was a bit harder, more clay-like, and was better with cooking preparation. Marrow bones in general are delicious, very high in all the fat-soluble vitamins, A, E, K2, some omega-3 precursors as well. Great source of caloric nutrition. Very important role they play through our evolution. What I usually do is I put these on a tray in the oven. You could throw them on the grill too if you have a nice hot flame, but the oven's usually easier. If you wanted to scoop this out raw and eat it raw, as you guys might have seen me do in some videos, for the smaller ones, I like using a metal barbecue skewer. So what I do is I go in all the way through, and I kind of scrape around the marrow in a circular motion, and then I just kind of pull it out. And you get most of the marrow out this way. Marrow bones usually have a very low yield per weight, so keep that in mind, guys. Definitely one of the more expensive sources of fat. And then after you scrape the marrow out of these bones, you can roast the bones and then maybe use them for a stock or a bone broth. I think it makes more sense to obtain the marrow and its nutrition in a lighter cooked state and then to just roast the bones on their own. So there's the lower leg bone marrow, very soft. And the upper leg marrow is a lot larger, so I use a knife. And I use the blunt side of the knife and I go around. And I take it out. As you can see, it's very crumbly, it's much harder, it's clay-like. There is a drastic difference between the upper and the lower leg bone marrow, as stated by some first Alaskan natives. So I have 2 chunks of beef fat here. This beef fat I'm suspecting is actually grain finished. I can tell by the texture, it's a little bit harder and it's waxier. This beef fat I'm 100% sure is grass-fed. It's not as waxy, it's much softer in general. Beef fat, as with bone marrow, is a very good source of all the fat-soluble vitamins, the same ones we stated earlier. Bone marrow might be slightly higher in certain vitamins and minerals, and I personally like the taste a little bit more, but beef fat is usually much more affordable, much cheaper, and serves the same purpose. These are literally the 2 foods that essentially fueled our evolution. Our ability to obtain a large amount of calorically dense foods that would sustain us over long periods of time. So sometimes I do have this raw on my steak. I would just put some salt on this and then spread it on the steak like butter. Sometimes I do cook it as well. So I have everything on a sheet tray here that I'm going to throw in the oven on broil just for a few minutes to warm it through. And we'll take a look at the color change. All right, so there's our beef fat. We have the 2 marrow bones. You want to be a little careful with the marrow because what happens is it's fat, so it literally can melt completely. For the fat, what I usually do is I just sprinkle a little bit of salt on it, and I eat it just like that. And you can cook it all the way through. You can leave it a little undone in the middle. This one's cooked more through, as you can see. A little softer, more gelatinous. This one is still a little uncooked in the middle. And then for the bone marrow, same thing I did earlier. You could scoop it out onto your steak, whatever you're having. And when the marrow's cooked, it's melted. It's much easier to get out. And it has a different color and taste as well. The taste becomes much more pronounced. It's much richer. And yeah, as we could see on the cutting board, it's mostly melted. It's like a mess of melted fat at this point. A lot of people call it beef flavored butter, and that's really what it is. It's delicious, it's nutrient dense, it's a great source of fat to add to your diet, especially if you're a carnivore. As with any food, there's really no wrong way to prepare this. Some people eat it raw. I personally like throwing it on the grill. You can broil it in the oven as we did here. You could even sear it in a pan. Try every way, guys. See which one you like. Either way, You're adding nutrient density, fat, energy to your diet. What really determines if there is a considerable nutrient content in the food isn't per se the cooking temperature, it's the initial quality of the food. So first, get a high quality animal fat, animal product, and then worry about the cooking temperature. If cooking it too much gives you digestive issues, maybe just lighten up a little bit. If you guys don't have access to a product like this, I suggest going to your local butcher, your supermarket, asking if they trim lamb chops. Lamb fat is usually grass-fed. It's a little bit easier to get your hands on. If not, ask them for beef fat or beef suet. I know some people that have gotten to Whole Foods and have gotten some. Recently, I launched a meat company, Frankie's Free Range Meat. We are selling fat, guys. The fat you see here will be reminiscent of what we are providing for you guys. So if you want to check out frankiesfreerangemeat.com, we have a fat pack that includes about a month's worth of fat for only $85. In addition to that, if you want to order some other stuff, you can also put fat as an add-on to your order. So check that out, frankiesfreerangemeat.com. If you want to know more about our mission, our goals, they're on the website as well. It's basically to provide everyone with high quality, nutrient dense food at an affordable price. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, hit that bell icon, and share the video if you can. If you guys would like to support me, just check out some of the videos I'm going to link at the end here. If you want to support me further, as I mentioned earlier, place a pre-order frankiesfreerangemeat.com on some high quality animal products. Again, thank you guys for joining me. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.